Trump is going to give a primetime address tonight.
No.
So it's kind of a little bit, I find it's a little bit surprising. Normally he would do that like after the new year. I wonder whether it's because he's not doing very well right now, right? His polling numbers are bad and the latest unemployment number is bad. Inflation is up. Republicans just lost several elections, including the latest one, the Miami mayor race, which
Yeah.
Miami you would think a Republican stronghold, right? So now
Yeah.
it's a Democrat won that race. So I guess all these in the beginning, when he first came to office, he could blame everything on the Biden. It doesn't work anymore, right? So he
Yeah.
feels like he needs to make his case. Is that the reason?
Well, I expect so. I mean, I didn't know this until you just told me about this
Uh-huh.
now, and but it is unexpected, and I do wonder what this is about. Of course, there's been a lot of activity. He's just announced, as he says, a sea blockade of Venezuela,
Mhm.
which so it may be connected to that,
Okay.
or it could be that he's intending to do something with the Ukraine conflict. I mean, he's not going to announce any diplomatic breakthroughs there because the Russians, Putin has just been speaking, and he doesn't give any sign of any kind of
Mhm.
concessions on the Russian side at all. But there's been rumors that that the Americans are preparing more sanctions against the Russians. So it could be something about that too. But we'll
Okay.
just have to wait and see. But about your underlying point about Trump's political position, you are absolutely right. I think he peaked sometime around April, May,
Hmm.
and since then it's been downhill steadily.
Hmm.
And what my American friends are telling me, and of course you live in the US, so I'm not there myself. But what my American friends are telling me is don't believe the hype about the American economy, the stock market, and all of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Look, in reality, uh, conditions of life for people in the US continue to be hard and are getting harder. So, and that probably is having its effect as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is clear the
Yeah,
inflation, I mean, the price has gone up.
yeah,
I think the inflation, the number itself is a little bit misleading because that's including everything, including like a refrigerator, car, those
yeah.
things. But for people who are daily lives, affect mostly are
Mm.
groceries, right? So those can go quite a bit up without showing in the inflation if all the
Yes.
other durable goods are not affected. So, but anyway.
You're absolutely right. Food price inflation here in Britain is extraordinary, and it's impossible to get accurate figures about it. But I'm hearing in every country that it is the same. And by the way, I wonder why. I wonder why price inflation is so high. I mean, what exactly is going on, which is causing the price of groceries to rise in the way that it is? There
Mhm.
must be some factor at play. And again, I suspect it's connected to the sanctions and to the war, but something is going on, which is actually, when you think about it, unexplained. Anyway,
Yeah.
there it is.
And also some update. TikTok is supposed to, remember he signed an executive order back in September and he extended it supposed to deadline like yesterday. But so I was looking it up, but turns out he signed an executive order on the September 17th, 16th. So that's the one, okay, extended to yesterday. But then quietly, 9 days later, September 25th, he signed another executive order. That one extended it to 120 days, which means the deadline will be pushed to January 23rd. So, in that executive order, he also explained that the framework deal with China will solve this national security concerns that the Congress has. So everything is good. The problem is, uh, China hasn't signed up on anything, so
No.
and the one more thing is BBC reported that they were interviewing some people. They call them billionaires, but I assume those are the potential investors. So they were saying that they have been left out of in the limbo, which means they don't know what is going on. Now, if the deadline is January 23rd, supposedly, if there is a deal going on, I would think right now they should be really busy, right? From both
Yeah.
sides, the lawyers, the content, everybody should be very busy. Apparently, that's not the case for these billionaires, potential investors. What do you think is going on? I mean,
I think gone.
I said that. I think I give this deal 50-50 chance. So what do you think?
I don't think anything is going on. I think what is happening is that TikTok is in limbo. Trump pretends that there is some kind of a deal on the table with China, and he's simply extending his executive order week by week, time by time, in order to conceal the fact that there is actually no deal with China. And I think that at some level, if you took him aside and asked him what exactly are you doing, he probably thinks to himself, well, all I need to do is wait, and eventually the Chinese will come round and will pay me money, or will agree to some kind of deal or other with TikTok. And of course, they're never going to do that because the Chinese are going to outweigh him. So I think that is, look, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are discussions taking place. But if there were, why would we not know about them? I
Mhm.
mean, why would that be secret and confidential exactly? I mean, I don't see the logic of that. So I think much more likely there is no deal. There never has been a deal. Trump has pretended that there was a deal and there never was one. And this just thing is just sliding on.
It's a tricky situation because China already made it very clear. It is Chinese law that the TikTok algorithm is regarded as a highly sensitive technology and that cannot be sold. At the same time, this TikTok legislation that passed Congress specifically said that the U.S. company has to own the algorithm, TikTok algorithm, in order to say, okay, it's a safe company. So I don't know how he resolved that. At the same time, Trump cannot really afford to really shut it down for many reasons. I looked at some numbers. Apparently, there are 7 million businesses are using TikTok
Yeah.
for marketing and sales. The small business in particular, according to Small Business Council, a third of their members are using TikTok
Yes.
actively for marketing and sale.
Yeah.
So at this time, I mean, Trump is already losing MAGA support and his polling number is bad. He can't afford to lose these people.
Well, absolutely, that's entirely correct. And of course, there's lots of other people who use or have used TikTok, and they won't be happy
Mhm.
either if the whole thing goes wrong. Now, I mean, again, Congress passing legislation saying that the US must have an algorithm that belongs to someone else in another country. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to get one's head around that is, I mean, that is so incredible. I mean, that's basically to confiscate intellectual property that not only belongs to people in China, but which is actually located in China. I mean, that really, I mean, it baffles the mind that such a thing could possibly be done. And you remember, I'm sure you remember how, in times past, well, not still, I mean, they still say it, about how the Chinese steal intellectual
Uh-huh. Yeah.
property from all sorts of people. Well, what is this then? But no, I mean, China is not going to give up the algorithm. Why should it? Of
Yeah.
course it's not. I mean, that's why I said they can outweigh Trump. For him, this is an embarrassment. And
Mhm.
it's an embarrassment that he will never resolve because his own initial calculation that the Chinese would fold is simply wrong.
Yeah.
Trump does this all the time, by the way. He constantly claims that he's made agreements and
Mhm.
done deals with people, and it turns out that he hasn't.
No. Yeah. He used this business kind of tactic. He thought it
Yeah,
would work for
yeah.
international relations, but countries
No,
don't buy that.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Okay. But anyway, I just feel like a TikTok deal, even after Trump, I'm not sure whoever is the next president can afford to shut it down, become
Yeah,
anger so many people.
yes,
So China is the one actually said you can shut it down. We're fine with that. So
yes. Mhm.
um the other thing is the Panama ports. Remember the sales of the Panama port we talked before, CK
Yes,
Hutchinson. So now there's some development as well. It was China's was okay to say, well, if the Chinese own the Costco would take half of the stake, and then BlackRock take half the stake. So it's a 50-50 deal. And both sides would have veto power. So China, I mean, previously that was like
Mm.
some kind of compromise. China was okay. But now China said, no, Costco has to own majority. Otherwise, Chinese government will not approve that deal. So you see, here's another tricky situation because in this latest national security strategy, to focusing on Western Hemisphere is like the focus right now. So that is the Western Hemisphere. So what should Trump do for this? It's another tricky situation.
Well, it's a very. I mean, first of all, I think the first thing to say is that there is no legal solution if you want to do what Trump wants to do, and what he wants is to get the Panama Canal back under complete American
Uh-huh.
control and the
Mm-hmm.
ports in Panama completely under American control. He wants the situation to revert to what it was back in the 1970s and early 1980s and before, when Panama was, to all intents and purposes, an American colony or an American protectorate. So that's what he wants to do. There is no legal mechanism whereby that can be done. He can do
Mm-hmm.
what the United States did in 1988, as I well remember. You can invade Panama. There are already American troops in Panama, so he can invade Panama and take over the country and take over the canal and the ports and all of that. That way, he can expropriate Chinese property and Chinese rights, which, by the way, would be an act of war. Just
Mm-hmm.
saying, but he can do that. I mean, but short of doing that, I cannot see how he can achieve his objectives. I'm glad you brought up the National Security Strategy document. We discussed it last week, and I think we said last week that what it says about Latin America
Mm-hmm.
is incredible. It basically says that from now on, Latin American countries are not going to be allowed to trade with China
Mm-hmm.
or should not trade with China.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some investigations there, and I find that one Latin American country after another, their major trade partner is China. I mean, it's what Trump wants them to do is cut off all economic relations
Mm-hmm.
with their biggest single most important trade partner, creating gaps in their economies, which is the United States is in no position to fill. It's an absolute neo-imperialist, neo-colonial operation,
Mm-hmm.
and it can only be done by force. That is true in Panama,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be true right across Latin America as well.
It seems like China and the US now is in a very interesting. It's not a traditional kind of a great power rivalry kind of a situation because it's not really in a hot war. But it seems like there's always arms twisting here and there, the TikTok deal, the ports deal, it's just always is that we're going to see continuing like these
Yes, we
type of.
are. Yes, we are. I mean, here I'm going to say that I take issue with an article that Arnaud Bertrand has written, the
Hmm.
French
Hmm.
commentator. I mean, he sees this as America in retreat, coming round to accepting China as a peer competitor and looking to regulate its rivalry with China. I don't see that at all. That is, I mean, everybody reads this document
Yeah.
in different ways. But as far as I am concerned, this is an extremely hostile and
Hmm.
aggressive approach towards China that is being taken here. I think that it clearly sees China as a rival
Hmm.
and an adversary. There is no hint anywhere in this document of the United States seeking a partnership with China on any issue. It doesn't seek partnerships with any country, by the way. If you look up, it's all zero sum and all of that. It just recognizes that China is today very powerful, as powerful in some respects as the United States.
Hmm.
And that's all.
Yeah.
And its approach is going to continue to be coercive, and there's going to be arms twisting and all of these things. And it's difficult to see how that can continue without relations deteriorating. Um, but that's the future. It seems to me that we're being offered.
If we pay attention closely to who actually wrote it, I mean, I believe what you said is Albert Jacobi
Mm,
is
mm,
definitively the one who wrote it. I
yeah,
also noticed that there is another guy who possibly participating is this guy, Alexander Gray. He was in the Trump 1.0 White House national security
mm,
team. Well, he pushed for like a Taiwan should do like a fight until the last Taiwan person. He's that
yeah,
kind of a
yes,
person. With
I
that
agree.
kind of people, how can they possibly, showing any respect for China as a country? It just,
Well, well, they don't, and again, I think there's been misunderstandings about what this document says about Taiwan, because
yeah.
a lot of people have said that the United States is softening
Hmm.
its protection of Taiwan. What this document is actually doing, and it reflects the opinion of these people, is that instead of talking as the Americans like to do all the time about Taiwan, independence, democracy, freedom,
Hmm.
human rights, and all of that sort of thing, all of that is trashed. Basically, what it says is that we are Taiwan. The importance of Taiwan, as it is at the moment, is exclusively connected to US grand strategy, and that grand strategy is hostile to China.
Hmm.
So that's where Taiwan now fits
Hmm.
in. Now, that's always been true, by the way. That has always been true. But in a sense, the mask has dropped. They're just recognizing that, they're just saying now openly what has been true always, that the reason the United States is involved with Taiwan is because it sees control of Taiwan as a strategic interest.
Hmm.
That's all.
Yeah. It used to, at least you could hear from time to time,
Mm,
okay, we want to see a peaceful reunification between the
yeah,
mainland and China. They no longer even say that.
no, no.
They say they want a status quo. Status quo means China never unify with Taiwan. That's status,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
So,
Yes. Exactly. I mean, it's a freeze. It's a freeze. It's another conflict
mhm,
freeze,
yeah.
which is whenever the US gets into trouble with, that's what it goes for. It
Mhm,
managed it with Korea.
mhm,
Up to now, it's achieved it with Taiwan.
mhm,
By the way, and again, I didn't, by the way, agree for once with Arnaud Bertrand's accounts of the Sino-Soviet split. One of the things he doesn't seem to realize is that one of the major proximate causes of the split was Taiwan.
mhm,
China at that time was expecting the Soviet Union to provide support to China over the issue of Taiwan.
mhm,
And the Soviet Union backed off doing that because it wanted to improve relations with the United States.
mhm,
The Russians know all about this, by the way. I talked about this with many, many Russians. So, it doesn't get this. And anyway, the Americans always want this. They want freezes of conflicts that they're losing. They achieved it with Korea. They've
mhm,
achieved it up to a certain point with Taiwan. And it's important to understand that the conflict that was frozen in the 1950s was the Chinese Civil War, as we call
mhm,
it in the
mhm.
West. I don't know what people call it in China.
Yeah, it
And,
is a Chinese civil war. Yeah.
okay, yeah. Okay. So that's the conflict that was frozen then, not in
Yeah.
any respect, Taiwanese independence movement or anything like that. So they freeze conflicts and they want to keep this conflict indefinitely frozen,
Mhm,
even though, as you have pointed out to me, way back in the 1970s, when they finally agreed to establish diplomatic relations with China, there were all sorts of agreements made then, which which laid out a roadmap for the return of
mhm.
Taiwan to China, to the Chinese homeland.
Yeah. Uh, Also, the U.S. Also recently they had raided a ship that sees some cargo headed to Iran from China.
Yeah,
Now, I don't think that ship belongs to China. It's unclear who owns
yeah,
that ship, but it sounds like it's a Iranian ship.
yeah,
And the US also seized Venezuela oil tanker
yeah,
as well. So US no longer cares about the freedom of navigation. They no
No.
longer even pretend anymore. Just seizing things.
I mean, bear in mind, I mean, they've always argued that their presence, their naval presence in the South China Sea, is to protect freedom of
Yeah,
navigation.
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Now they're seizing ships on the high seas.
Mhm.
The Russians believe that they are involved in the attacks on tankers, oil tankers in the Black Sea.
Hmm.
You know, they're
Hmm.
Ukrainian attacks, but it's the Americans who are providing the information about where these tankers are. So all of that, and the seizing a Venezuelan ship, the seizing an Iranian ship. Um, Obviously, they don't believe in freedom
Hmm.
of navigation. And of course, by the way, as I understand, I've obtained advice about this. This falls within the definition of the law of piracy, which is still a law under international maritime law. But anyway, hey ho, that's what the United States is doing. The United States only cares about law when it suits it. When it
Hmm.
doesn't suit it, law isn't something it's concerned about anymore. It,
Yeah.
it, it has a purely functional relationship to law. It discovers legality when it suits it.
It does whatever it chooses to do, whatever it wants,
Absolutely.
until
Yeah.
somebody to stop him. Stop
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some development regarding the Japan situation.
Yeah.
It's not improving. And I sent you a picture, right? That this Japanese
Yeah.
military officer was,
Yeah.
getting ready to behead a Chinese guy. That picture actually is very famous. My understanding, it was at the time was reported by some Western media and
Yeah.
accompanied with that picture, and they even said who that officer is. Turns
Yeah.
out that officer's name is Takaichi. So that's
Oh
the
my
family
God.
name. And so that's where the discussion is in China. Okay, so is the current prime minister the granddaughter of this soldier, this
Yeah.
officer who was beheading the Chinese guy? She actually was asked about that multiple times. This come from Taiwan. So in Taiwan, they have more connections with Japan. So there were people asked her multiple times, and she never admitted, nor did she denied it. Just so you know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
How
So
interesting.
sometimes when you're not answer, that's an answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
right.
Well,
And
obviously, I mean, if there is no familial connection between her and this man, why
mhm.
not simply say so?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Not only that, the Japanese
Mm.
media actually they got a copy of those questions and answers prepared ahead of time before her testimony to the Japanese parliament. In there is the parliament. This is a routine,
Yeah.
testimony thing, and so they send it the list of questions ahead of time, and her office was preparing for the answers. And in there, regarding Taiwan, it's actually said, try not to answer it, meaning, just muddle it through. So that's what in there. It's clearly
Yeah.
marked, but that's not what she did.
I
Meaning,
know.
when she was asked that, she was expressing her true feeling. That's the only explanation,
Well,
right?
that is very interesting to me because after we discussed this comment on in a program on the Duran, I got several contacts and people in Japan and said to me that this was an unexpected question,
Yeah.
and she made up her answer on the spot,
Mhm.
and that this is why her wording was not as carefully chosen as it would have been, and that in fact the wording was not intended to be as aggressive as some of the translations have suggested. So it turns out that no, that isn't true. Just saying.
Yeah, she got the question ahead. And this should be a question everybody prepare for. I mean, if you're Prime
Yeah,
Minister of Japan, of
yeah,
course you would prepare to
of
answer a
course,
question like
of
that.
course. Well,
Yeah,
I never believed that. I should say I
yeah.
never believed that, and I've never really responded to those emails. But
Uh-huh.
I've had several of them from people in Japan writing to me in that way. Mhm.
The most outrageous thing is she is saying that if China unite, mainland China unite with Taiwan, that would pose a survival threatening situation.
Yes, I know.
That that is the exact reason they used to when they last time attacked China, when they invaded China. That was a survival threatening situation back then, according to the militarism, the Japanese militarism. So she is just like almost like a World War II 2.0 kind of a
Yeah, absolutely.
answer.
I completely agree. I mean, um, in what sense can reuniting the territory of a country to the country to which it belongs to pose a threat to a third
To
country?
Japan.
I mean, to another country. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense at all. I mean, the comment already presupposes extreme hostility towards
Mhm,
China.
mhm. Yeah. And then one more thing is also the Japanese media that somebody noticed during the December 7th, which is the anniversary for Pearl Harbor attack, um, that everybody, I mean, it's clear that it is a surprise attack, right? So, but the Japanese former chief of staff of the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, Tashio Tamagami, he actually posted on social media claiming that the Pearl Harbor attack was not a surprise attack by Japan, but rather the result of a long-term containment and coercion by the United States. In other words, and he said Japan was forced to retaliate. In other words, Japan is a victim, not an aggressor.
Yeah, yeah. This is becoming a very standard trope in Japan, actually. I mean, it is absolutely true that the United States did impose economic sanctions on Japan in the run-up to Pearl Harbor, but that doesn't mean that the attack was justified, and it doesn't mean that the attack wasn't a surprise attack. Of course, it was, and there could have been negotiations. There was even talk, by the way, of a summit meeting at that time between the Japanese Prime Minister Konoye and President Roosevelt to
Mhm,
see whether they could sort out some kind of way forward. But of course, the thing also to understand here is that the reason for the deterioration in relations between
yeah,
the United States and Japan at
yeah,
that time was Japanese aggression
yeah.
in against China,
Mhm,
which was starting to impact on American interests.
mhm,
So, uh, uh, it, saying that a particular situation that arose at that time, that Japan was a victim of it,
mhm.
is absolutely turning history round on its head. Because in effect, what happened was that Japan launched one aggression. That aggression led to other countries that were
Mhm,
concerned by the effect that aggression was having on them, taking steps, retaliatory steps, and Japan then engaging in a further aggression
mhm.
in response to those steps. I mean, that is the correct way to see it.
But I do think there's a lot of signs that in Japan, this militarism is just picking up steam, and they are dangerously
Mm.
never recognize their own fault, their own even recognize their own defeat. And it seems like I think they're just downright dangerous, even for the United States. When they're talking about a Pearl Harbor attack like this, I think the United States should be also
Well,
alarmed.
of course it should. Well, of course it should, because I mean, the other thing to say about Japanese nationalism is that it is by no means pro-American. I mean, why would it be? I don't know whether you're familiar with a Japanese writer called Mishima. Mishima was a very, very important writer, very, very good writer, by the way,
Mhm,
in Japan in the 1950s and 1960s. Anyway, he was a fanatical nationalist and he was very anti-American.
mhm,
Just saying.
mhm. Yeah, some of the Japanese movie that I watched in the
Mm,
80s,
yeah, yeah.
they don't picture the
US soldiers.
flattering way
No,
in their
no,
movie. Yeah.
no, no.
So yeah. So we will see. Okay. But lots of people in the US doesn't seem to understand that. In particular, I
No,
think people in the
no,
Congress, they still think, oh,
no.
Japan is the best ally. Well, you dropped a two atomic bomb on that country. How much of an
Absolutely.
ally can it really be? Okay.
Absolutely. The other thing to say, which is I think something which perhaps people in China ought to know, is that since the Second World War, Japan, with the enormous assistance of the United States, has had a tremendous image remake.
Uh-huh.
So most people's idea of Japan here,
Yeah.
in Britain, for example, I think in the US too, is of this very peaceful, well-ordered, law-abiding
Yeah.
country, with kimonos
Mhm.
and sushi and
Mhm.
all of this. And I mean, it's seen as a fundamentally very benevolent place. Yes, there were the samurai, and they were involved in all sorts of funny activities, fighting each other. But I mean, they're hardly really a great threat to the world, and very very few people in the West really can imagine that picture of Japan with the real Japan of
Yeah.
the early 20th century, or indeed with the real Japan of today,
Mhm.
which is a very different society from the one they imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, the Japanese on the surface, they always smile and bow
Yeah,
down, very
yeah,
polite, and yeah,
yeah,
so giving people the impression there are no harm, people.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
All right. So Thailand and Cambodia was enter its 11 days of conflict now.
Yeah.
Trump's phone call no longer works. So what's your view on this conflict?
Well, I mean, I don't have a huge amount to say beyond what
Mhm.
we've already discussed about this. I mean, for Trump, this should be a lesson. And of course, it is obviously an embarrassment because he pretended that he'd achieved peace,
Yeah.
and he obviously hasn't. And I'm going to make a prediction, by the way, that eventually the country, if there's going to be a successful mediation, it's going to be done by China, which is historically important relations with both of these countries, and I believe is the biggest trade partner of both of these countries too. So there we are.
And I think if we look at all those so-called peace deals negotiated by Trump, I, I'm not sure they are that sustainable. I mean,
Yeah,
if you look at details, it's always like the US will get some natural resources from one or two countries and then pressure China or Russia get out of there,
yeah.
kind of like it's not really resolve the fundamental problems.
No.
That might
Right.
be
Well,
right.
that's what the Russians said. They said that he's never, in terms of the Ukrainian crisis,
Hmm.
he's not addressing the root causes, as they say, of
Hmm.
what that conflict is. Trump's peace deals, like his trade deals, are basically smash and grab operations. He comes in, he claims that he's coming in as the mediator, or the person who wants to do the deal. And for him, the point about whatever agreement he's making is that it's a deal which has to advantage the United States and ultimately him himself. So, and what he thinks he can do is that he can use the United States to coerce the various countries, basically to give him what he wants. So it's sort of about really resolving a dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, about which he knows absolutely nothing. He knows nothing about either country, or about the histories of these countries, or what the disputes are about, or what the history of the disputes are. He wants basically to have everybody there come to make a deal, and then he expects the Americans, including his friends, by the way, to move in and to make a lot of money out of it. And by the way, that's his approach to Ukraine. He's opposing the European ideas about confiscating the Russian assets. But that's not because he really objects in principle to them doing that. It's because he wants a cut of the assets. He thinks they should be given to him and to the United States instead. And he's very, very angry, apparently, that he's being left out. So this isn't obviously international relations in any accepted sense. And I mean, these peace deals, as I said, have no substance to them, just as neither do his trade deals either.
Yeah.
We've discussed this before. Whoever heard of a trade deal that is negotiated in a few weeks? I mean, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that.
Well, the same thing with TikTok. His
Yeah.
buddies also heavily involved.
Yes.
Those investors are
Yes.
his buddies. They want to
Yes.
make big money out of that.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's part of the reason they cannot just shut
Exactly.
down TikTok because it's too much money at stake for his friends.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the
Exactly.
port deal, of course, BlackRock, that's another, moneymaker
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So what's the latest about the Ukraine conflict? Is Zelensky really gave any concession about not joining NATO? Is that right?
He made no concession at all.
Okay.
He has said that, look, we're not going to pursue NATO membership for the time being
Okay.
because we know we're not going to get it. But he's not said that we're never going to join NATO. He's not said that Ukraine is going to become neutral and non-aligned. What he's demanding in its place is a military alliance with the United States. Article 5 guarantees, enshrined um, in a treaty ratified by the Senate, the US Senate. So he wants a military alliance, which is effectively, from a Russian point of view, the same as NATO. And apparently, there's been agreements that European troops will enter Ukraine as part of this peace deal, which the Russians have already rejected. And there's going to be a Ukrainian army of 800,000 men, which is bigger, by the way, than the armies of all of the European states put together. Huge army. And apparently, according to the latest reports, lots of discussions about the kind of weapons that can be provided, when the Russians have said that there should be no heavy weapons provided to the army in Ukraine. So, in substantive terms, in real terms, there has been no agreement at all. And we've had, over the last couple of weeks, since November, a huge amount of activity. It's always activity with Trump, never action. We discussed this in our last program. Huge amount of diplomatic activity. And it's brought us back exactly to where we were when we started. Nothing has actually been progressed. There's no real movement. Zelensky's even refusing to withdraw from Donbass, which is not by any means the most important thing from the Russians. I mean, there are other things that are equally important, but he's not even prepared to concede that. So this is not a deal that the Russians are going to accept. Because again, all that it does is it freezes the conflict, creates a huge army in Ukraine, puts us exactly back in the situation in which we were in before. And Putin has just given a speech this morning, by the way, which he pretty much says this very briefly, but essentially says this. And the word is that the United States is drifting back to, you guess what, more sanctions against Russia. That this is now where it's all heading. In the meantime, the Russian army continues its advance.
I have to ask you this, right? Is it possible that in some cases, a peace deal simply is not achievable? That it simply have to let two sides fight it out. Even the Cambodia and Thailand situation, it started with this temple. The temple, I think the name is a prayer we hear. They started with this dispute. Now the temple's dispute is not new. They had been going on and off for many, many years. And so now this time it started again. But it does seem like both sides has domestic issues. Now in Thailand, that they're related to their military, their royal family, and in the Cambodia side is the Hong Sen family. Okay, so both sides seems like need a war of some sort for whatever domestic problems. For that reason, I think China hasn't stepped in so far because at this point, it's almost like impossible to negotiate any peace deal. They have to fight for a while until both sides is tired or something in order for a peace deal possible. I wonder whether that's the same case for Ukraine and Russian war.
Well, absolutely it is. I mean, by the way, all of what all of this diplomatic activity is doing, in my opinion, is it's probably prolonging the war, in the sense that I think that left to itself, Ukraine would have come round to accepting that it had lost the war and that it needed to make peace long ago. I think there would have been there were negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in early 2022, and there was almost a draft agreement on the table. But then the Ukrainians were told by their friends to walk in the West to walk away from it, and they didn't walk away with it. And there was the war all over again, and it continued. But I think for at least 2 years now, since the failure of Ukraine's summer 2023 offensive, it's been obvious that sooner or later, in some form or other, Ukraine is going to lose. And with every day, there is less of Ukraine. The Russians advance, the bombing continues, more people die. I think what these negotiations, this talk of negotiations, all of this activity is doing, is it's giving the Ukrainians the idea that if they just could go on fighting for a little bit longer, their friends in America will manage to get the Russians to agree to some kind of a freeze of the conflict, which will be in the Ukrainian, which will end the war in ways that are beneficial to Ukraine, or at least the fighting in ways that are beneficial to Ukraine. So, going back to your point, your question, you're absolutely right. Sometimes the only way that a war can end is either through one side defeating the other or through exhaustion. I mean, there was never going to be a negotiated resolution of the Second World War. That was never going to happen. So, I mean, it was the kind of war where one side had to be the victor and the other side had to be the defeated. That has not been true up to now of the conflict in Ukraine. The Russians have repeatedly said that, yes, they are ready to negotiate despite the fact that they are winning. But the negotiations that have taken place have actually ended up making the conflict more difficult to end diplomatically. And I would not be surprised if all this meddling and activity that Trump is engaging in with Cambodia and Thailand is actually doing exactly the same thing. That instead of it leaving the Cambodians and the Thais to sort it out, it's actually making them fight longer and harder because they're each maneuvering now, thinking that perhaps if they say the right thing, they could get the Americans over onto their side.
Yeah, yes, they are. That's pretty much what happened because after the
Yeah,
phone call, they both sides are saying we have, U.S. support. They pretty much, I
exactly.
don't know what Trump told them, but they
Yeah.
seems like, oh, we have a good relationship with Trump now. Okay, we don't need to be afraid. It almost feels like that. So,
Yes. Well, this is again, this, by the way, this is something else that Trump does. He tells each side what they want to hear.
yeah.
Now, I know this all about Ukraine. So he told Putin in Anchorage, we agree that you should have all the contested territories,
Mhm.
and we agree that Ukraine should never join NATO. And we agreed that there should be restrictions to the Ukrainian army on the side of the Ukrainian army. And we guarantee to you that we will get the Ukrainians to agree to these things. That's what he said to, that's what the Russians say.
Mhm.
He told them in Anchorage.
Yeah.
We just had these meetings in Berlin, and the Americans have told the Ukrainians, you can have an army as big as you like with whatever weapons you want. No, you don't have to retreat from all your territory. And yes, maybe you don't have to join. You can't join NATO just
Mhm.
immediately, but you can still get a treaty of alliance from us. I mean,
Mhm.
he's telling each side
Yeah.
what he thinks they want to hear, and in effect, he's fooling them both.
Yeah.
It's not the way you conduct diplomacy, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably better just he doesn't get involved.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been arguing that, by the way, all along. Since before he was elected president, in a program we did on the Duran back in August 2024, I actually said the best thing for the United States to do, for Trump to do, is to say, look, we've been involved in this war. I'm going to end our involvement in
Mhm.
this war. And now it is for the Ukrainians and the Russians to sort it out between them. I'm not going to be involved. Period.
Yeah.
Much better to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And
If he'd
definitely,
done that, we would now
yeah.
have peace.
Yeah, actually. And the same thing with the Taiwan situation. The best thing is the United States stay out of it. That's it. I
Absolutely.
think China
Yes.
is fully capable of resolving this by itself. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah.
I should say that Trump is not the only American
Uh-huh.
who
Yeah.
falls into this fallacy. The Americans constantly have this urge to insert themselves into every
Yeah.
quarrel.
Yeah.
And you see this all over the world. China doesn't.
Yeah.
That's never been anything that China has done.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for the Cambodia and Thailand situation is China has been very quiet,
Yeah,
mainly because China see the situation. Okay,
yeah,
right now there's nothing China can do, honestly.
yes,
So
absolutely.
I mean, unfortunately, for the two countries, they have to fight to
Exactly.
get somewhere, but that's just the way it
Yeah.
is, though.
Yes. That's the way it is. That's how it works out. That's what
Yeah.
international relations is like. I
Mhm.
mean, you cannot impose perfect peace. And
Mhm.
if you're the United States, not only are you not going to impose perfect peace, which is an impossibility, you're going to impose perpetual war instead, because that's what American meddling always brings about.
This National Security Strategy 2025. So there's some report about that, saying that there is another version of it, which is almost like a different draft
Yeah.
that didn't get published. So somebody got a hold on that piece, that draft which was
Yeah.
interesting. Is that of course it's more clear to me from that. It's more clear that two things. One is uh, Albert Jacobi, I think, proposed this so-called core five, C5, to almost replace the D7. So the five are US, China, Russia, plus India and Japan. Why would he want to bring India and Japan in that clearly hostile towards China? So that's pretty clear to me, like a 4-1, right? Now,
Yeah.
if Russians sometimes can stay out of it, it will be 3-1. Okay. So that's very clear. Again, reaffirm what we believe this whole national security strategy is targeting China,
Yeah.
definitively not
Yeah.
pulling back. And the other thing interesting is that it says here that Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Poland are listed as countries the US should work more with the
Yeah.
goal of pulling them away from the European Union.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like they want to break up the European Union. So
Yes.
they want to get out of the Ukraine war, but they don't want to see a unified and powerful Europe either. So they want to
No.
break it up, right?
You're absolutely correct. I think this is one of the other misconceptions about this document, which is, let me just talk about Europe first.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a view that it envisages an American pullback from Europe. I didn't read it that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
It is very hostile to the European Union. It is very hostile to recent political developments in Europe. One of the reasons it's hostile to the European Union is because it sees the European Union as obstructing the priority, which is to stabilize relations with Russia. Why do we want to stabilize relations with Russia? So that we can focus on China instead. But what it basically wants is to weaken the European structures, divide, fragment Europe again, so that the United States can control it better.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so, I mean, it wants to tighten its grip on Latin America,
Mm-hmm.
and it wants to tighten its grip on Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
What it doesn't want is the Europeans developing their own ideas
Yeah.
and their own foreign policy, which might involve the US in quarrels that the United States is not interested in, and might cut across American objectives in some ways and in some places. But it is not about an American withdrawal from
Mm-hmm.
Europe. Now, as for the Core Five, I think you said it exactly correct. It's a straightforward play to isolate China.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the one hand, recognizes that China is
Mm-hmm.
the is a great power, equivalent to the United States, but you're going to have the big five. I've heard suggestions that the US imagines itself the perpetual chairman of this group. So I mean, not only the big five, but the big five with the US always in charge, always convening the meetings, always drafting the agendas, always doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's going to have India and Japan there,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's the US, China, so it's the US, India, and Japan versus China. And of course, they're going to try and win over the Russians
Yeah.
by stabilizing relations with them.
Mhm.
So, absolutely, that is exactly what it is about. I mean, in some ways, it does show a certain realism, like the published document does, which it recognizes which are the great powers:
Mhm.
China, the United States, Russia.
Mhm.
India might one day become a great power. Japan isn't. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
and never will be. I mean, but it's still a big country and it's got a big economy and all of that. So throw it back in. It's a reliable American ally. And it's intensely anti-Chinese.
Mhm.
So you not only chair the meetings, you not only dictate the agenda, but you have a structural majority.
Mhm.
And the other thing, what this looks like it's intended to do, is that it seems to me it's intended to replace the UN Security Council,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
sense that again you're going to have a 3 to 5 majority on this committee, and it's the US envisages it as basically taking the place of the Security Council in forming international law. I mean, this thing is dead on arrival,
Mhm.
and I mean, it's never going to happen. The Russians are not interested. The US is constantly trying, by the way, to get Russia to agree to
Mhm.
rejoin the G7.
Uh-huh.
Putin has recently spoken about this, and I mean he's utterly trashed it. He said long before we were thrown out of the G7, I was so frustrated by what was going on there that I stopped bothering. I stopped attending. I no longer bothered to go. I sent other people because for me it's just everything was decided there by the Americans and the others, and I didn't see why. But it's so transparent. You could see what the Americans are trying to do.
Yeah, and it's pretty, I would think Albert Kobe should be a pretty smart guy, but how can he even believe that China would agree to it? I mean, right?
Elbridge Colby is a very smart man,
Hmm.
and so is his friend Wes Mitchell. Aaron Wes
Hmm.
Mitchell.
Yeah, West
I've
Mitchell, yeah.
I've read their pieces. I mean, they are. We have this expression in Greek, which is koutoponiros, somebody who's both extremely clever
Hmm.
and at the same time a fool. I mean, and this is what he is. I mean,
Hmm.
he's probably, if we were to meet him, he would be brilliant,
Hmm.
incredibly erudite, facts at his fingertips, able to come up, answer every question, come up with brilliant
Hmm.
things. But when you actually take a step back and you look at the strategy that he's outlining, you could see that it's just stupid.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there
yeah.
are such people, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's so obvious. Why would China go along with this C5, whatever that is called? And
Well, the Americans have always also fall for this, that they always imagine that they are cleverer than the people that they're dealing with.
yeah, okay. Anyway, so I'm not even sure Trump himself bought that idea. Maybe that's the reason it's not in the final
Yeah,
draft,
yeah,
the
yeah.
final strategy. So, anyway.
Well, that's right. I don't think this is. I think you've hit exactly correct. I think this is an early draft,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
was then reworked and
Hmm.
resulted in the strategy paper that we have. There are some suggestions that the published paper is there for public relations and that this is the secret classified one, which is the one that really counts. I think that is wrong, actually.
Yeah.
I,
Uh-huh.
I think it is the published paper which is the real one.
Yeah.
And it's bad enough, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah, I think so too. I think even Trump can see this is not workable. I mean,
Um,
Keir Starmer, his office almost like officially announced that he's going to visit China January 21st or
yeah,
23rd. But then the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said, we haven't discussed the matter.
no.
So,
I know all about this. It's been commented about here. He's invited himself to China. He's going to speak to Xi Jinping. He's decided that he's going to change Xi Jinping's diary, run the diary, and all of that. I mean, it tells you an awful lot about the very high opinion we have of ourselves here. Just to say,
the same time, the British, they still haven't approved this construction of the new Chinese
No,
embassy. And
no,
they have
no.
been, since for the past couple of months, have been sanctioning Chinese companies left and right for
Mm,
various reasons.
mm.
But I mean, what is he trying to do here? So he think he, by doing all this, he would have some kind of a leverage or something
Yeah.
against China?
Yes, I think he probably does. I think this is the absurdity to which Britain has fallen. I should say that British people in general um, would also see this as absurd if they knew about it. But I mean, the idea I suspect is that we'll take all of these threats that will give us something to bargain with when we go to meet Xi Jinping. We will go to China. We will tell Xi Jinping, if you agree to do this, that, and the other, then we will let you have this big embassy in London. And Xi Jinping, assuming this visit ever happens, will respond in the way the Chinese always do, with great courtesy, very
Mhm,
patiently. They
mhm,
won't lose their temper. They will explain carefully, in the way that the Chinese always do, what the realities of the world are. They will explain the advantages and win win
mhm.
cooperation and all of these things. And it will go in through one ear of Keir Starmer's and out of the other, because he won't have any ability to understand what Xi Jinping is telling him.
It's, I mean, we talked about so many times that they need to understand, whether the
Yeah.
United States, United Kingdom, if you want to talk to China, well, just talk to China. You don't need to bring a lot of things that you believe are leverage or chips or, cards or whatever. Don't play those games. Just have a real conversation, what you need, right? And see what two sides can agree on. Why complicate things like this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I never liked her, but Angela Merkel understood that very well. And
Mhm,
I remember she used to come to China. She had all her people from business, and they would actually discuss business. And they would say to China, look, we want to invest in these industries in China, and we would like your investment here, and we want these industry cooperations and all of that kind. Do that, and that actually will lead to progress.
mhm.
That will, I mean, China is absolutely up for that. No doubt about it. They are very, very practical people,
Yeah.
but come along and play these pointless games, and the Chinese will respond as well, the way they always do. And you don't have to be an expert on China to see this. All you need to
Mhm,
do is to go to the Chinese Foreign Ministry's readouts on the website, and you will see how China acts, how they respond. As I said, they're very polite. They have unlimited patience, and they will explain it all. You know,
mhm,
don't talk to us like this. Come with constructive, practical, concrete proposals, and
mhm.
we will work with them. But don't lecture us, don't dictate to us, don't think you can gain any leverage over us, because you can't.
Is it because the European countries and including the United States, that's how they deal with each
Yeah,
other? They
yeah.
always have something on my hand when I negotiate with you. Is that how they work amongst themselves?
Yes,
That's
it is
how they
exactly.
see things.
It is
Okay.
exactly how. I mean, I've said this many times. I mean, we come from a continent, Europe, which has been always, it's always involved intense interstate competition. So
Hmm.
it's always a game of one party trying to gain leverage over the other party, and trying to bargain in that kind of way in order to achieve advantage. I think I've told you one of the classics about modern European history, late 19th century and early 20th century European history, is
Hmm.
A.J.P. Taylor's book, The Struggle for Mastery in Europe. And that's how Europeans and Americans think. It's always about the struggle for mastery, for ultimate control. China doesn't work like that,
Hmm.
because Chinese people overcame all of that long ago during the time of the Warring States. I mean, that's not how Chinese statecraft works today. Nobody in the West can understand it.
Also, regarding this, EU agrees to indefinitely freeze the Russian assets. So
Mm.
they are going to use this money to give to Ukraine. Is that the idea?
Well, that is absolutely the idea. I mean, there is still a lot of opposition, but
Uh-huh.
they've already used emergency powers to freeze the assets permanently.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's always a possibility that even if this opposition continues, they will use emergency powers to get around that opposition. I mean, it's become very, very obsessive now. The Russians have started legal proceedings,
Hmm.
and there's apparently a commercial treaty between Russia and Belgium, which provides for the setting up of a tribunal if to adjudicate on any disputes. The Russians say that they will use that provision and that this tribunal can be based in any country and that its decisions are binding under international law. And apparently, there's no real doubt about this. And the word is that once that happens, the Russians realize that the Europeans will never um, allow enforcement of that judgment on European territory, but the Russians will enforce it in Asian jurisdictions. And the one they're talking about is Singapore.
Well, well, when you see this, okay, I think
Yeah.
it's totally crazy to do something like that.
Yes.
You can just see somebody's asset like that, and then
Yeah.
in the meantime, you look at the U.S. sees cargoes, ships,
Yeah.
and
Well,
Nexperia.
I was going to Xperia. What? How is
Yeah.
that different ultimately? I mean, seizing Xperia and the way that that was done. I mean, obviously the scale is different, but the
Hmm.
principle is the same. You
Yeah.
take someone else's property and declare it your own.
Yeah. So we're back to the European piracy periods now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because it seems like the mask is off, right? So for a
Yes.
while, that Europe is regarded as a very civilized society, you law binding and all that kind of thing, right? Right, to follow through once you have a treaty or an agreement of some
Mhm.
kind, you have some rules and people do behave like following that. But that seems like everything's off now.
Which are absolutely gone. I mean, you remember Josep Borrell, the former EU foreign minister, Kaja Kallas's predecessor. He
Uh-huh.
spoke about Europe being the being the garden
Yes.
that was surrounded by the jungle. By the way, uh, again, I don't know whether people in China know that, but he was actually when he used those words, he was quoting a passage in a poem by Rudyard Kipling, who was the poet of the British Empire. I
Okay.
mean, he wrote the most imperialistic and,
Mhm.
by the way, racist poems. He's a brilliant poet, by the way, but in praise of the British Empire. And
Mhm.
he spoke about the British Empire being this nice garden, this nice
Uh-huh.
tended garden, surrounded by this jungle and all of that. So, I mean, it's very, very indicative of the mindset of these people.
Yeah. Yeah, we just need to be prepared now. Europe
Absolutely.
is now is a jungle. We have
It's
to
a
be
jungle.
prepared.
That is the real jungle. And of course, the US too.
The Middle East, okay. So
Yeah,
Israel is continued to its military operation and conducting daily attacks on the Gaza Strip. So
yeah,
there again, there is another peace, so-called peace deal negotiated by Trump, but that doesn't really
yeah,
solve problems. So this will continue. There's no enforcement, right?
yeah.
No. Okay.
No, absolutely. I mean, we discussed it at the time.
Yeah.
We said on this program that this wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to be a peace deal. And absolutely, I mean, there is no way it can be because again, it doesn't address the ultimate
Mhm.
reasons why there is this fighting. And I mean, it also won't accept something else, by the way, which is the US's own role in
Mhm.
bringing
Mhm.
this conflict about. Same about Ukraine, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if US really want peace, I think the best way is US stay out of
Yeah.
it,
Yes.
and including not to sell weapons.
Yes. Yes.
So, right, lots of the conflict will stop if US stops selling weapons, I think. So,
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Yes. I mean, why did the Chinese Civil War? Why did we have this unresolved issue
Mhm.
from the Chinese Civil War? Because the United States stepped in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If no other reason.
Mhm.
I mean, the Americans talk as if this is a dispute between China and Taiwan.
No, no,
It's not.
no.
It's the Americans again inserting themselves into a civil war and prolonging it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I agree. So just so many conflicts that US stay out of it, the
Yeah.
conflict would have never happened or ended
Yes.
much quicker. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. The last thing, the Eurovision, the song contest. It seems like just lots of drama going on there.
Yeah.
Um, Several countries, Ireland, Netherlands, Spain, and Slovenia, they are boycott that.
Yes.
But Eurovision, why they are so stubborn? Really want to invite Israel. Israel to me is not even a European country.
Well, it's an excellent question, and I don't have a simple answer to that. I mean, some of the European states, Germany, for example, have pretty
Mhm.
much made it clear that if Israel is not invited, they will pull out because Germany has this enormous commitment to Israel because of its own history. So, I mean, there is that. I suspect that there are also industry reasons involved as well, just to say. And bear in mind that though nobody has so far accused Russia of genocide, the
Mhm.
Russians were expelled. So
Yeah,
you
exactly.
expel Russia, but you keep Israel in and all of that. My own personal view about Eurovision, by the way, is it's long past its sell by date.
Uh-huh.
Back in the
Yeah.
60s, it was fun. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
it then. It was a fun thing. It still was to some extent in the 70s. But today, it's just
Yeah.
become another pompous, bloated institution that nobody really takes much interest in. And the better thing is that it should die. What is interesting about this particular quarrel is that despite everything, all that we have seen Israel do, there is still this loyalty to it
Mhm.
amongst such an important part of the European political class. And I agree. Why is Israel, which is not even in Europe,
Mhm.
involved in Eurovision at all?
And then Australia is not a European country either, but Australia is. But
Yeah,
Russian actually, I think Russia is European, but it's
yeah.
not.
But it's
It's not
not
invited.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
the Eurovision, it's always I feel like it's always very political, even before all these things.
Oh,
I
sure.
remember one year when I was in Sweden watching it together with some other Swedish people. They can't stand to see like Norway to win. You
Yeah,
know that?
yeah, yeah.
So they would never vote for the participant from other, Scandinavian countries. I was so surprised that they feel very strongly, whenever. Uh,
It
so,
goes all the way back to the 70s. I mean, I remember that Ireland, juries in Ireland, always
uh-huh.
voted against the British candidate.
It's almost more comical, more interesting to watch that than the
Yeah.
song,
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
You
Yes.
see all the
Well,
tensions.
I mean, nearly all the songs have been completely forgettable, if I have to say
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see what happens. But yeah, anyway, just one thing I want to say. Actually, when the Eurovision context, they have uh, countries like Australia and uh, Israel. It's almost feel like they kind of admitted that like Australia is like a colony of Europeans, right?
Yeah.
That Israel, is a colony of Europeans.
Yes.
Almost feels that way,
Yes. Yes.
right?
There is undoubtedly an undercurrent of racism again here.
Yeah.
I mean, Israel is one of our own.
Hmm.
Australia
Hmm.
obviously is
Yeah.
one of our own.
Yeah.
The Russians aren't really, though.
No.
And others around the world absolutely are not. And of
Yeah.
course, we don't want the Americans in because if they were in, the Americans would win every time. So that's the only reason we don't have them.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Let's talk after, but
Yes.
after the
Yeah.
Christmas. All right.
Uh,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.